It really comes down to everything I did in my life up to the point that I decided this is what I have to do and I stopped going into the office. Just led up to that decision. But looking back, what have I done my whole life? I've always kind of been self-employed. I have always been a go-getter. I've always jumped off the cliffs and made my parachutes on the way down. Open land, crash and burn, all of the above. So why would I allow this to not be the case in this venture? So I just said, honestly, it's more like shut the fuck up and go. Like, why are you doubting yourself? And like, Ruben, just do it.
You're listening to Lights Camera Crypto, the podcast exploring all things entertainment and Web3. I'm your host, Stephen Ladden, and this week our guest is Ruben Rojas. Ruben is a well-acclaimed artist and entrepreneur, and in this episode he details having an unfulfilling career, albeit well-paying, in real estate and finance, and how reconciling that unfulfillment is really what catalyzed him to pursue art. He started out making murals for himself, and that started to gain a following. He ends up pursuing canvas and t-shirts, and eventually that led to digital art. And now he's one of the most recognizable figures in the art world, spreading a message of love. Let's see how he got there. Ruben, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure, and really excited to dive in to learn more about you and your trajectory through art and all that stuff. Growing up, maybe as a starting point, did you always know that art was your path, that you wanted to get into art, that was sort of the way?
Good question. No, I've always been an artist though. So like I always drew book covers and the art classes, and I was the drawing guy, right? But during the time that I was growing up, it wasn't like encouraged as far as it wasn't not encouraged. Like my mom stuck us in all kinds of art classes and painting classes and crafts, like you name it. But it was always like, go to school, get the good grades, go be a doctor, go be whatever you want, but like in the realm of what's normal, quote
Sure.
unquote. But here I am, I did everything under the sun to avoid becoming the artist that I was supposed to be, but you end up becoming what you're supposed to become as long as you listen to the voice. It might take a little longer in some places, but it worked out.
In terms of listening to that voice, what helped you give your how did you have the confidence to lean into and listen to that voice?
It really comes down to everything I did in my life up to the point that I decided this is what I have to do and I stopped going into the office. And that's when I was a financial advisor. Just led up to that decision. And just looking back at what was I doubting? What was I thinking were reasons not to do this? It was a lot of stuff that was just kind of made up in our heads, right? In my head. We make up stories and meanings around everything. And fear is a real thing, right? And doubt is a real thing. But looking back, what have I done my whole life? I've always kind of been self-employed. I have always been a go-getter. I've always jumped off the cliffs and made my parachutes on the way down. Open land, crash and burn, all of the above. So why would I allow this to not be the case in this venture? So I just said, honestly, are we okay with cursing?
100%.
Okay, well, like it's more like shut the fuck up and go. Like, why are you doubting yourself? And like, Ruben, just do it. So one day I stopped going to the office and that was it. But it was looking back at everything, looking back at all my businesses, all my ventures, all the things I took a risk on and realized like, dude, I have the power to make this happen. It's all on me. And if I operate out of personal responsibility, if I don't do it, how will I know I even was going to fail or not fail at it?
Mm. And I like how you crafted that in terms of personal responsibility, because really by honoring your own personal call, you're honoring your purpose the world. And to not honor your call and to not honor your purpose would be not only a disservice to you, but a disservice to potentially many others.
No, totally. Like we all have a set of skills, a gift, a opportunity, a purpose to go do whatever it is that we need to do. I think where we get lost, and I could get caught up in it, and we can all get caught up in it. It's like, well, I'm not the president of the United States, so how am I going to make a difference? You could just be a good citizen. You could be a great brother, a good friend, a good father, a good business partner, whatever it is. Like, don't think so grandiose out the box. Examples I give are if I say I'm on a world peace mission, you'll be like, wow, that's like a kind of egomaniac type statement. Like, you out of all people. I'm like, no, but if I could change one person to look at the world through the lens of love, and they could do one, and they could do one, and they could do one, if all those ripples go into play, and create a seismic, you know, ripple effect through the whole world, then that could create world peace. Am I on a
Hmm.
mission for that? No. But we all have the potential to do something like that.
Totally. And is that perspective something you had and held when you were working in finance, or did that come after? Has it always, in a way, been, I don't want to say dormant, because you're expressing it, on a larger scale now. But was it in you prior to you fully actualizing it through your art?
Excuse me. Um, you know, it's the thought process, right? Like the operating system was there, the drive was there. I wasn't framing it. I'm continuing to upgrade my OS as I'm going through this, like to keep it easy. Every time you upgrade your iPhone, you've got new features. So that's kind of what was happening. And I was always a go-getter, and I always knew that I could count on myself and be the catalyst that I needed to create change. And did I set out when I painted the first mural, like, wow, I can actually affect change and people can start looking at the world through the lens of love? And they're like, hey, I live through love too. No, my first mural said, who will you be? And it had a bunch of ways of being: truth, joy, leader, responsible, worthy, like you name it. But I painted it for myself because just prior to that, I'm doing well, I'm successful, I have no baggage, I'm not married, right? I'm healthy, I'm fit, and I'm making a lot of money, but I was miserable and I was depressed and I couldn't understand why I couldn't get out of bed. So I had to paint a statement on a wall. I had to paint this mural as a reminder to myself. I'm like, what if I could paint this and just remind me when I drive by what I need to see in the world? Because what are the reminders that we're seeing? We're not good enough. We need a bigger truck and more cars and bigger boobs and freeze the fat. Like all these things that are not really speaking into a positive self worth or an image of like we're enough. It's more fear based. So I
100%.
was operating in this fear based world, and I'm like, I need to paint reminders. And just after doing it for a few years, it just became like, wow, my purpose is this mission. Like I have to do it. And the stories that people are telling me. So as I did it, it only reinforced it. Was the framework there? Was the intention there? Yes. But I think if it comes down to seeking to understand yourself, once we can love ourselves, we can give and receive freely, then we can start understanding everyone else. But I think if you don't understand you, how can I understand you? Right?
Right. Totally. Totally. Well, and I love too how you, and so often from these conversations, there's the awareness and the just the comfortability of creating for oneself, and from that place, call it success or resonance or whatever happens. And what I'm really excited by, and I think you're articulating it really powerfully, uh, in how you were creating, you were in a place mentally where you needed this reminder, and it was helping you, and it was in that self-serving way, so to speak, that by helping yourself you were helping other people. I think that's really beautiful.
Yeah, and I think no, it's a great way to reframe it. And I think I think people think that choosing yourself is selfish. And guess what? It's okay to be selfish. You know, it can lead to you being selfless. But sometimes I think we get confused, and I know from sticking around in a relationship too long, sticking around in a business I didn't want to do or a career path I didn't want to do. They're like, well, we have to do this. We're martyrs. Like, what else are we going to do? I'm going to be the good boy. I'm going to do what I'm supposed to do. But like you know, if you're religious, we're given free will and free choice by God, right? If you're into evolution, we evolved into something better than we were. So however you frame it, we have the power to control us, and we can all choose. The hardest part is realizing that we have a choice. And just off of projects I've done in the past, I've been able to talk people that they didn't think they had a choice, and really understanding that some people don't believe that and don't see it, while others see it super clearly. Like, how can we just remind people, like, you have the choice and the opportunity to do this? And it's being careful in that too.
Sure. Well, it's a great responsibility, and it's how do you see you have a choice when how can you get to a place when to see that you have choice when you've been operating perhaps on autopilot that you didn't have a choice?
Well, autopilot's a whole nother ballgame, right? I mean, I get stuck in my current day to day. You got to want to find it and realize that you're on autopilot and realize, like,
Mm.
wow, 5 years just flew by.
Yeah.
Sometimes we forget and we get complacent. And again, all these things are okay. And I only speak from how I've been able to use it to get to my point. You know, I can't tell you how to do it, but I could tell you what worked for me. And sometimes you just get fed up, you know, and hopefully you don't get fed up at 70, you get fed up at 30 or 40 or 50. Um, but one of the things that I saw, and what led me to doing this, is I first saw one day being married with kids, you know, my colleagues and everyone saying, dude, you're really good at this finance thing. Like, you're one of the best. You're going to be top in the nation. And I'm like, yeah, but piles of money for me to go home and be a resentful, angry asshole that I can't hide, buying things for my wife and kids. They'll see right through that because I'm still an angry asshole. And I'll probably end up divorced and my kids resenting me. I'm like, no, I'd rather have less, be happy, and have my wife and my kids loving and we grow together. So some of those things were like, that is more painful than the risk of not changing my life. So I think it's
Mm.
starting to ask the questions of like, where am I right now? Am I really happy? What am I doing this for? And what's keeping me in this path? And most often, it's just the fear of not trying the other thing. But the beautiful thing about where we are now, I mean, anyone could start a YouTube channel, anyone could start a social media account, anyone could start a side hustle and make something. Doesn't mean you're going to go quit your job and run off with it tomorrow. Might take a decade, but opportunity is there now more than ever.
Totally. And with that opportunity, I think there's also, the fear of, in addition to the fear you just mentioned, the fear of what if I try it and I suck? And what if I try it and, you know, it's just the fear of trying it to begin with, that oh, I'm interested, but not even am I going to suck. I know I'm going to suck, so I'm not even going to try it, So then that builds resentment within you because you're not doing the thing that you have an inclination that you could be good at.
Hmm.
It's there's a lot to your point that uh you know society's the norm isn't to, hey, which it should be. I think we're both saying that it should be, hey, what do you internally, money, other factors aside, what do you want to do with your life? What makes you want to get up out of bed in the morning happy, fulfilled, and start there. And it kind of sounds like from your thought process when you were projecting out and thinking about, wife, kids, and stuff like that, that path was born whereby you could do what you love and maybe in the call it short term sacrifice money or financial gain, but there's also that other opportunity by looking inside and tapping into your internal greatness, the opportunity to potentially make more than what you're already making down the road, you know? And I think that's the other piece that perhaps is lost, where it's like there's a lot of answers in here that you know we we forego in favor of the path that, oh well, I'm going to be a good husband and a good father and you know gut it out when, well, you could be both those things and still have a happy, fulfilling life.
Hmm. And all of that is true. And these are all questions that are based in fear, and we don't know what's going to happen. Well, you know what we do know? We're going to die. It's
Totally.
not morbid. It's true. You're born, doctor slaps you on the ass, you take your breath and start crying. You're on your trajectory to death. And we don't know when that's going to be. So imagine just living like my life is my most precious gift. What am I going to do with it? And look, I have plenty of Netflix and chill days too. It's not about hustle, hustle, hustle. It's like do what you need to do, but just make sure you know the choices you're making. And what do you have to lose? That's the other thing.
Well, a simple question, but if we look at your trajectory as an example, th- there's a lot, to not take the action to ask yourself those questions. And I think we don't realize that we have a lot to lose by not answering those or asking ourselves those questions
Hmm.
because we haven't been that train of thought perhaps isn't the, call it the norm of getting introspective regularly to think, well, hey, am I living my best life for me?
Hmm.
And getting to that place. So hopefully, and it sounds like it does, projects like your art will help people ask themselves those questions in the same way that, you know, it started for you as a reminder to figure out your own life.
Hmm. Yeah, we're all mirrors of each other. But going back a little sooner, it's like, well, what if I suck? What if people don't like it? What if people aren't going to like everything, right? But there are 8 billion people on this planet. Someone's going to like something, right? We're on this podcast. I have a podcast. There's 2 million and something podcasts in the world. And then there's a bunch of dormant ones. And do you not start a podcast? You're like, well, people are already listening to those. Why are they going to listen to mine? You just got to do it. You got to do it and put the things out there. Like, not all of my stuff's the best, And if you see my first stuff versus now, like now it's identical. I could just do it millions of times identically. But I look at the first ones, and I'm like, ooh. I mean, you could tell it's mine, but it's different.
Sure.
So, trust me. Like I say, there's like three fears. The fear of success. What does that look like? How do you unpack that? The fear of failure, completely different. How do you unpack that? And then there's the other one, which is like the first two, I've succeeded, I've failed, like it's part of life. But then the fear of what'll people think about me, right? There's a lot of
Mm.
us that fall into that too. So we're trying to show the world who we are according to the definition of the world, right? In my 20s, it was make a ton of money, have big rims on my truck, diamond watches, like all these things. I was 25 years old balling out of real estate, right? And that was what, I needed in LA. And I mean, luckily I was still a nice guy and all that, but I could have easily fallen down that other path of not a nice guy. But that's what I thought success was. And I think a lot of us fall into that. And just when I was in finance for 10 years, people make a lot of money, but live way beyond their means. Maybe you're making 500,000, but you're living on 1.5 million. What's going to happen when you're 50 or 60? Is that house the thing going to make you happy inside or the car? And trust me, I like a nice house and I love nice cars. But, but what's your why behind it? right?
Mm.
So that's how I start looking at things. Like my wife and I and son, we travel. Like that's one of our big things. Eventually we're gonna buy a home, but like those are like our major things. But I'm not gonna buy us a house to put myself in a financial constraint that, oh well, now I can't travel. No, that's like one of the most rewarding things about life. So just think about, why are you doing the things? Is it for people to look at you and say, hey, you're succeeding, or it looks like it on paper, but they don't know what's going on inside? Also, for a lot of people that you probably don't really care about, and they don't really care about you, they just think it's cool. And I used to like operate like that in my 20s. Like, yo, yeah, look, I got all these things. But what did it really mean? To me, now it's about conversations and like having more of those moments. It's also, you don't need a million friends, you know? As I get
Totally.
older, the one thing I realize, it's hard enough to keep in touch with the small narrowing window that you have, especially when you're trying to build and have colleagues and peers and mentors and all these things. So, yeah, I don't know if we went on a tangent there, but
We
we,
went on a we went on
we
a the right tangent in the sense that it's aligned with everything we've been talking about. No tangent's a bad tangent here, by the way. It's a brilliant space of infinite possibilities. So we'll get to the topics that we need to in the way in which, in the same way that life, to get a little existential, the same way that life paths unfold in the way that they're supposed to, so too does this podcast. So there's no tangent too extreme or incorrect. But I think
cool.
to everything you said, the ability to kind of ask why is, I mean, it's at the basis, I think, for everything we're talking about, from the mural that you initially painted. I would imagine it had seeds of why in there, of, why am I waking up feeling unfulfilled in this financial position, and then the unraveling thus is, I guess the question here is, did the unraveling of you becoming aware after that first mural like mirror your artistic trajectory?
Well, what led me to that point, let's say, like I was lucky enough in my early 20s to make a lot of money and go completely bankrupt, like, and hit the
Wow.
floor.
Yeah.
So, like, it was 2009, bankrupt, DUI, the whole shebang. Like it all went really, really bad. It was a wet reckless, but according to the DMV, it's still a DUI. Nothing crazy. Pre-Uber. Um, now there's no excuse. Asterisk. No excuse. You have an Uber. But I think part of that, and then going back into finance and realizing I'm in another gig where money's the definition again. I think I just had that opportunity, and it helped me open up my eyes, because I learned that after you lose it all, money isn't everything. Like I hang out with more billionaires now. Like there's millionaires and then there's billionaires. It's a whole nother world. Like it's just another world. And even them, one of my other poet friends was telling me, why you hang around with more billionaires now? Because you have something that they can't buy or have. Like what you're creating in the world is different than buying a business or generating a business. And it's not good, bad, or the other, but it's amazing to also be in that space to start having ideas with people there and everywhere. But what led me to the art and the message was all of these things in my life, right? The bankruptcy, the having tons of money and no one else had it, then not having money, then only working for money and trading time for money, but realizing I have so much creativity inside of me, doing everything under the sun to ignore my career. And then all the things I did prior to that, other businesses and ventures, and the fact that I went to pre-med, then went into real estate, then went into finance, then went back to art. Like, why be afraid to reinvent yourself? You never know where you're going to be or where you're going to end up. And I think all of that is what led to the decision. It wasn't just one, aha. It was more everything. And I think listening to it. And I guess asking, what do I have to lose? Well, what I have to lose, I'm down this other path. And then I'm 52,
Right, right.
divorced, kids hate me. Like, I just foresaw that. And I think ultimately that foreshadow of that is what helped me kick it over the edge.
So you kick it over the edge, art becomes the focus. You have that initial mural. What was sort of the point at which it was the next, tipping point where it was like, okay, now art is this is the path that I'm going to live in, and its tributaries, for the foreseeable future.
So the first mural was 2014, started in 2013, ended in 2014. For the next 3 years or 4 years, I was still in finance because I didn't just wake up, paint a mural, and got paid, right? I painted another mural, and I'm like, well, I hate this, but how do I make money on this? So the business side. So for the next 3.5, 4 years, I was trying to figure out how I turn this thing into a business. Once I figured that out and made it viable, plus my now wife was a key instigator and like, you can do this, like all the things you're doing, you can do it. All my clients are like, why aren't you doing that? Like, we'll be fine. Leave us alone. Like, we'll take care of our investments and insurance with somebody else. Like, we got it. So, all those things added up to 2018. I just stopped going to the office. I just went, boop, I was out. Stopped going in. And it was really the I call it mediocre hell. I was in the middle of self-sabotaging on purpose the finance biz. Not any of my existing clients, but what I didn't do was get more business, go get referrals, grow it. Because if you're growing something that's doing really well, it's really hard to leave it. And then on the other end, I'm trying to figure out, how do I paint this art stuff? How do I make money on it, put food on the table? Before I had a notion of what my entire brand or ethos was, I took on other mural gigs. Hey, paint this giant kombucha bottle on our warehouse. Paint this, paint that. And those paid pretty well. And I'm like, oh, I can make money off of this. And I was committed to what my message was. Also asking the fact, like, I don't even know what my message is. What is my message? What is my book? What is my look? What is my brand? It just all happened. So I was just saying yes to what was happening, and it just came out and happened. I think sometimes we look back and analysis paralysis or trying to figure it out is is where we get stuck. So I just naturally kept saying yes, and the pain was more painful than the risk of doing something because I didn't know what the pain was on the other side.
Right. And it sounds like then the pain was on the other side was really just the process of figuring it out. And you know, it sounds like mural after mural, the in a combination of doing the work and asking yourself the questions of what's the bigger thing here,
Hmm.
the path kind of created itself in a way.
Yeah, yeah. I just followed it.
Amazing. So in many ways, it was asking questions, saying yes, walking the path, and trusting that that was going to lead you to a place, since the alignment of, hey, I'm following my heart, I'm following what for me feels like the right step. Conceivably, then whatever happens from this place will also be right for me.
Yep.
Amazing. So, okay, the murals are paying, things are working in terms of figuring out your messaging and call it brand and stuff like that. What then the is there a moment, or is there an experience where you feel like planted and confident? You're no longer, the financial fears are in the rear view, from the financial job, and now you're sitting. What was that experience where you're sitting in that driver's seat, and you're doing it? This is now your reality.
First note, financial fears are always there, right? um, but the fears of like, what does this look like? How is this a
Yeah.
business? How, like all that, it subsided clearly because now I'm making it and evolving and having it happen. But it's still like everything's based on me. I've got to go do the work to create the income. But at the end of the day, if I was a billionaire, if money wasn't an object, I'd be doing the exact thing that I'm doing. So that's how I also know that I'm doing it right. The money's a byproduct. Just like I train for my health, my wellness, my mental, the six pack's a byproduct. So as long as that's a byproduct, it's important. Like we need to make money, we need to prosper, and having a lot of it is not a bad thing. But as long as you're sticking true to your mission. So that was the shift in that. Um, and that's what got me to that point. And then just expanding from murals to canvases to prints to clothing, you name it.
And along the while or along that journey, did the mission become your own personal mission through the art? Did that become more and more clear as you made those uh, transitions and growths, or how did you define or come to uh, really spreading the message of love?
Yeah, every mural was, I call them paint inspirations, right? Every mural is a new painted inspiration on the wall. It's a love letter to the city, to the neighborhood, wherever they flew me, wherever I was painting. And every time I painted a new one, it just added to that, right? Live through love as a tagline, as whatever, however I use it, wasn't even coined until the end of 2019, maybe 2020, right? So I was painting this whole thing, just putting it out there as paint inspirations, and then it became that. I don't
Mm,
think Nike started and it was just do it, right? It's Ruben and
right.
then Nike, and then the love logo is my swoosh, and then live through love is my just do it tagline. That's how I look at it. And one day, because I'm dying to collaborate with Nike, so I'll put it out here on this. Nike's gonna say, "Just do it like Ruben and live through love." That's the campaign.
Mm.
Um,
You can see it on a sneaker, you can see it on a shirt.
right? I've mocked up some stuff, but it just became a thing. I think I know when I get stuck on things, and then there's like let's say I'm writing a speech, I'm just looking at the thing like this, and you don't know where to start. You just don't know where to start. I think you just have to do it. Just do the thing and do it. Smart. Like I said before, you could turn your side hustle into your thing. But just because you had one successful eBay flip or brownie sale or whatever it is that you do, doesn't mean, oh, let me go quit and do this. Photography business, video editing, make a business out of it. Get someone to hire you. You have to do these things like, oh, I can make a little bit of money here, a little bit of money, a little bit of money. Get to the point of whatever your salary is, wherever you live, 65, 75, 100,000. You need to replace a good chunk of that. And you better have some reserves in your bank account. You can see I was in finance. You don't just quit, because what happens if you just quit and go and fail? You didn't fail because it was a bad idea or a side hustle. Maybe you weren't prepared enough. Maybe you didn't have enough in reserves. You didn't know how to build out the business, the marketing, or everything. So I always tell people to be careful. And if you look at what I said, it took me almost 4 years before I went cold turkey and all in. And it's
Right.
not because I was being overly cautious. I was going through all those conversations still in my head. But I think that's also what's important.
Yeah, and it's I it's hard to separate though from what you're saying. And again, you've had an amazing, unique set of experiences leading up to those decisions to finally quit finance with cold turkey. But you listened to yourself and didn't allow, from what you're saying, to that perspective to be colored by things that weren't coming from in here. And that in itself takes a lot of guts, you know so was there anything that you mentioned, your wife telling you to, you got this, you can keep going? Was there anything, or were there a combination of things that and it could be from what you said earlier, you were always happy to bet on yourself and confident in that manner. Was this just another avenue of you betting on yourself, just in a different, call it, ball field? Or were there other influences that were helping push you to go down this path?
I mean, it's a combination of both. One is that self bravado and confidence I have in myself based on my experiences of I literally asked myself, Ruben, you've always been able to make money. Like, why is this going to be an issue? You know, my legal side hustles as a kid, all the things. Like, I've always been able to make it. So, um, that was one question. Yes, there's people encouraging me also, but I still had to do it for me because if we're doing things for other people, that's where it like we get expectation hangover, right? You do it and then maybe it doesn't go out as planned or what was said, and then you're like, wait a minute, because you didn't do it for you.
Mm.
You know, there was some key moments and some key people, all these things that led down this path. But ultimately, it had to be me. A lot of what these people did was just help me handle the doubt and the fear that I was already creating, right? My own stories.
And they helped you push past them and
Mhm.
see that they were your own stories and not necessarily the reality of the situation.
Yeah. Like, for example, I was writing poetry to my wife. No one knew I did poetry. Um, and she was my girlfriend at the time. She's like, "Oh, I buy this R.M. Drake guy on Amazon. Look, here are all his books. Like, you should do one of these. Like, these are great." That led me down a whole path of I created an Instagram for poetry. That grew really quickly. And then I stopped and I started incorporating that into more of my work. And now I have a poetry journal. But things like that are just like, oh, you can do that too. Look what you're doing. Why not try it? This person's doing it. So those are examples of like, oh, look, here, check this out, what they're doing. You can probably do that too. So I think it's always good to show people examples of what other people are doing, um, especially if it's attainable, right?
Sure.
Don't be like, I don't know. Let's say I was dabbling in acting. They're like, yeah, look, you're just like Brad Pitt. Am I? Am I though? You know, so like, I would say like give examples that are on par. You know, if your kid's making
Right.
rockets, don't call him Elon Musk, but hey, you can be like Elon. You know, choose your path. I think unrealistic expectations tend to feed the fear too. You're like, yeah, but I'm not that person because comparison is not. We want to use them as our examples, not as
Right.
what we want to become, what is possible.
Right. And I think to your point, it's showing that this is a certain path is a possibility. Here's somebody who's done it. You don't have to be them or be like them, but they
Hmm.
just happen to have walked in this path and you can carve your completely unique path and also see that it's possible because of, XYZ.
Yeah.
Awesome. So you mentioned before, kind of the broad strokes of eventually getting, established in murals, moving off over to canvas. What then perpetuates the shift or the growth or the transition to Web3 NFTs, cryptosphere?
It's the next thing. And I don't mean it like fad. It's not a fad, right? We go Web 1. Web 2 is social media and all that. Played a big role in my murals being spread around the world and people posing in front of them and being able to experience them. Now we've got Web 3. And there's so much to it. What really fascinates me is, and a couple of things, is authentication. You can authenticate a physical product with a digital product, tie them together, tie it in the blockchain, and if you want, you can separate them, sell them separately. But like that's forever in there now. You can't forge that like a fake COA or now it's
Sure.
kind of so that's a cool thing. The other thing of just being able to experience the world differently and digitally. I mean, I still had a weird thing of my hand painted stuff versus my digital art. Even in my head, I don't know why, because it takes me actually longer sometimes. I'm downplaying the digital stuff versus the physical stuff. I don't know why. But it's just we've been doing it too, right? A ringtone that you used to buy for your cell phone back in the day, or a screen cover. Those were basically NFTs back then. But now there's just ways to authenticate it and move it forward. And then Web3 just gives everyone the opportunity to create anything they want. Like I have these love, fear worlds that I want to build in my head that were going to be physical. But I'm like, ooh, now I could do that in the Web3 space. I could do this in Decentraland. I could put some virtual glasses on someone. Yeah, it'll take a ton of money to build it out, but It's less than we're renting out a warehouse and building it out physically that only people in that area. And like now you're building it, the whole world could experience it. So it's the connection that's exciting for me as well. And we'll see where it goes. Sky's the limit. Right now we're just seeing the baby steps of it.
Hmm.
But the virtual clothes, I've already had people sell fake Ruben clothing. So
No
being
way.
able to authenticate some of like these are handmade, hand painted, or it's the cut and sew stuff. Like when you buy it, scan this, and here's your little NFT version of it, authenticating your garment. And then the NFT becomes a collectible, and then that also something you can wear when you have your avatar and you're ready to go play in Web3, which I think a lot of people are still far from creating their own avatars, but trying to get there and be ahead of the curve is kind of cool too. So we'll see where it goes, and I'm open to a lot of suggestions, but not to take away from the physical world. I think it's about playing in the two and melding them together, not using one to escape because I know how that can go.
Totally. And it sounds like you're kind of straddling that line pretty beautifully by keeping community in mind and at the forefront. And as you said, from a cost standpoint, if you can create an experience around your art that a huge amount, a wide swath of the population of the world can see versus just a community in Los Angeles, that's something too, and
Hmm.
it will be interesting to see. Do you hope then through your art in that side of things, in the digital side of things, that it will help perpetuate more involvement and more adoption of Web3, and that people can, to what you're saying, see it as a tool to build community in a way that we haven't been able to do before?
I mean, the answer is yes to all of that. You just think about it. A year and a half ago, getting into the NFT and the 8 hours of homework just to sign up to get a wallet and then transfer USD to crypto. And like, what do you want? Oh, I need Ether. Oh, I need Bitcoin. Oh, who do I change it through? Oh, what is Coinbase? And before Coinbase, like I've been doing crypto before that too. It's like, it's scary. And like, oh, my money could just disappear. Oh, like, so that has been one of the barriers to entry, right? It's like, I have to sign up for this secret world that no one knows the passcode to. And now you can sell an NFT with regular USD. So I think early adoption obviously was to the diehards and the people that love jumping off cliffs early and taking all the risks. But realizing in that first drop how many people I knew that weren't native to the space, and they're like, "Hey, I just spent 8 hours logging in to create this to get your NFT." I'm like, so I know there's great community and fans, and they want to learn it. So part of that is helping the education and the evolution of it, but it's also seeing where can this go, and what's the barrier to entry, what is the cost, and does an NFT have to be thousands of dollars when you drop it? No, like my next project is going to be very, very inexpensive, but it's just exciting. It's super exciting. I have like crazy ideas where I want the first mural on Mars, and I have like
Mm.
an NFT collection on Mars. There's a few videos, and the guy I work out with works at SpaceX. Like he's a rocket
Oh, no
scientist.
way.
So I'm like that close. I've done the tours. It's just a matter of I keep saying it. Maybe Elon's like, "Yo, put in a couple plywood panels. We'll install it up there." It's not necessarily me going up there and paint it because I won't make it back, and I love my life. But sending something up there would count. So that's how I think. So I think part of this new world is going to be able to do, like, imagine if we do that and then we create a virtual experience of that and people go like, "Hey, I'm on Mars," and they're in the Web3 space walking through it, right? So it's
Yeah,
like
it's
looking at all those things, and sky's the limit. There's really
yeah.
no limit.
Well, pun intended here. It's universe is the limit.
Hmm.
It's really cool to think too, that now with an established message and brand too, how that can translate across this. Like you can have a bigger impact than you're already having, which is immense as it is, but to fathom that it could be even larger because of the technology is also really kind of fascinating to think about too.
No, totally. And one of the things that fascinates me with what you said, but going deeper, is because I sit here and say we either operate out of love or we operate out of fear. And then we choose how we want to see it. And it's not saying fear is bad, like there's purpose for fear, and fear is good, but it's negative, pessimism, doom and gloom, woe is me, victimhood, martyrdom. When we get into that way of thinking and our pattern base, we can become very cynical. We can become very bitter. We can just be like going through the motions, and that's feeling like autopilot. So some of the cool things is like I want to actually, I feel like I could take people and plug them into my brain and be like, look, we can look at it this way or this way. Actually give you the example. You still have to choose. We can react or we can respond, right?
Mm,
You can choose or someone's going to choose for you, but a choice is being made, which all comes back to taking responsibility and how you want to control your life. So if I can create worlds and experiences where I'm running you through fear, like bombarding you, like having that visceral effect, like showing him going in a little bit on some of my future thinking, and then flipping it and giving you the answer with all the love and all that, and
mm,
having that integrate into your body. And then you get that physical effect when you start really physically feeling it and taking it in and immersing yourself in it. I think maybe people will get it even more.
totally. And now you're talking about art literally being an experience that can transform someone through not necessarily passively observing a work and having that, observing a mural or observing a painting or observing clothing and having that, your senses are perceiving it and you're taking it in. This is literally putting an individual or a group of people in a scenario where they're surrounded, or they're experiencing your art. They're having that, as you said, that reaction or that connection to it, and the output of them is in some way either incrementally or perhaps larger. There's change, and
Hmm.
that's powerful.
Yeah.
So flash forward in the coming uh months, if we can project out that far, years, like what can we expect along this, along the forward thinking track, from both your art and your projects, like what can we expect to see?
Just pushing the envelope more. Here's a question I, excuse me, I asked myself. I think I wrote something the other day. I was talking about this. It's like, are you playing small? Can you play bigger? What's next? I'm always looking at what's next. And every year we level up, we do cool projects. I also need to pause and reflect and celebrate what has happened, but really what's next and what can I do at the next level? And I think when you start thinking that way, you can evolve, but also it's not jumping. Once you have a thing, you don't just randomly jump and do something else. It's also perfecting what you've done and how do you evolve the whole thing moving forward. So probably meeting some of the right people to build out, I don't know, call it planet love. Um, and
Hmm,
the moons are like empathy and kindness and
love it.
um, talking it out as we speak it. These are all things that I think about, but some of that's also just not in my wheelhouse. I wouldn't know how to code any of that, right? And then you want to find the right people to do it with that, make sure they align with the mission. So that's where it gets hairy and scary. But we'll see. What's happening. This next project's a million acts of love. Um, Early next year. That's kind of all I can say at the moment.
Okay.
We've got the podcast continuing to grow, the clothing, the art, the murals, doing even more murals. And in 2016, I started playing with augmented reality. I think bringing that back to my murals now that you could just pick up your phone and be like, and it starts working and bringing back to the messaging I wanted to do way back then. The only problem is you have to be in the perfect spot with the perfect light, and maybe it worked.
Hmm.
Um, it was just the barrier to entry on tech was tough there, and then you have to make someone download an app that was pretty glitchy.
So,
So,
so the tech has kind of caught up to the vision that you'd had back then is what you're saying.
oh yeah, the tech's definitely there now. So it's just getting the right team to execute it all together, and now tying what I did back then now, you know. Anyway,
Neat. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Which that's how does it feel then to also be in a way you were ahead of the curve if the vision was something that can now be implemented, but back then, you were ahead of the tech.
it's interesting because I do look back and like what you just said. Now you're like, dude, I was ahead of the curve for a long time, and now I feel like I'm a little behind the curve, um, which I'm not. But like I look at other NFT projects and things out there. But I also look at that space as another vertical to the art universe that I have. It wasn't my end all be all or anything. And it wasn't like, oh, let's shift everything here now because it's hot and popping. I mean, now look what's happening. So to me, it's just prints are a thing, right? Clothing's a thing, sculptures are a thing, NFTs are a thing. Everything I do is to amplify the message of living through love, and we all learn differently. One of these things get to land for somebody, whatever. So pick your jersey, your journey. Is it a sticker? Is it a T-shirt? Is it a painting? Is it a mural? Tune into the podcast, a keynote speech, whatever it is. Like I'm just here to share how I do it and how I practice it, and hopefully it lands for someone to be able to make the choices they need to make so that they can practice living through love as well.
Mm. Amen. Amen. Well, Ruben, if people want to practice or find out how to potentially live through love, how can they find you? How can they find the messaging? How can they find it all?
Easy. It's my name, Ruben Rojas, RUBENROJAS on Instagram.com, Twitter. The podcast is Live Through Love. Just Ruben Rojas, Live Through Love. Google it, it'll pop up.
Amazing. Ruben Rojas, thank you so much. This has been a phenomenal conversation and one that, I'm inspired. I hope the listeners too are inspired as well. And what a journey, what a trajectory, and what a message.
Thank you for having me, Steve.